so far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign, and they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign. I beat Hillary Clinton easily, and frankly, we beat her, and I'm not even saying from the standpoint, we won that race, and it's a shame that there can even be a little bit of a cloud over it. People know that, people understand it, but the main thing, and we discussed this also, is zero collusion, and it has had a negative impact upon the relationship of the two largest nuclear powers in the world. We have 90% of nuclear power between the two countries. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what's going on with the probe.
You can't believe anyone. Why do you think that President Trump trusts me? I trust him completely. He is defending the US interests. I defend the Russian interests. Give me at least one fact which would tell about a certain collusion during the election campaign in the United States. It's completely absurd.
Well, as you were hearing a bit of there, both leaders spoke very positively about the progress made at the summit as a whole, with President Trump saying today's talks have changed the relationship between the two countries.
Our relationship has never been worse than it is now. However, that changed as of about 4 hours ago. I really believe that. Nothing would be easier politically than to refuse to meet, to refuse to engage, but that would not accomplish anything. As president, I cannot make decisions on foreign policy in a futile effort to appease partisan critics or the media or Democrats who want to do nothing but resist and obstruct. Constructive dialogue between the United States and Russia affords the opportunity to open new pathways toward peace and stability in our world. I would rather take a political risk in pursuit of peace than to risk peace in pursuit of politics.
I think we can call it a success and a very fruitful round of negotiations. It's quite clear to everyone that the bilateral relationship are going through a complicated stage, and yet those impediments, the current tension, the tense atmosphere, essentially have no solid reason behind it. The Cold War is a thing of past. The era of acute ideological confrontation of the two countries is a thing of a remote past, is a vestige of the past. The situation in the world changed dramatically. Today, both Russia and the United States face a whole new set of challenges.
Well, let's talk to Sky's Russia correspondent, Diana Magnay. She's outside the presidential palace, where, of course, those talks took place and have just broken up. And Diana, from the Russian side, it could be said that President Putin played with a very straight bat. Absolutely no collusion, no meddling in the American election. I've been straightforward about that, said President Putin, and Donald Trump believes me. But at the same time, when President Putin was asked who he wanted to win the American election, he was very clear that he wanted Donald Trump to win because he said it would normalize US-Russian relations.
Exactly. He said it's all well and good backing one candidate in an election. That's common practice. And I wanted Donald Trump to win because he would normalize relations. I mean, when I watched that press conference, it seemed to me as though both leaders had got exactly what they wanted out of it. President Putin starts off, which is an advantage anyway, to be the first to speak. And really the way he starts is by positioning Russia alongside the US as a superpower, the world's two largest nuclear powers who have a special responsibility together to solve the world's crises. It is Russia once again a great power on the world stage here in Helsinki. That is exactly the message that President Putin wanted to portray to the world and wanted to portray back home. And I think similarly, looking at President Trump, he wanted to stand beside the Russian president and say there was no collusion, to talk extensively about the Russia investigation with President Putin by his side, and to be able to, just get it all off his chest and have President Putin stand there and say, of course, we didn't have any collusion with the US. It all seems, something that, of course, we wouldn't have had any involvement with. I think what's also interesting there is that Russia consistently offers to cooperate when other countries accuse them of, for example, the Salisbury poisoning. Russia's line has always been, we'd love to see the evidence. We're very happy to cooperate with the investigation. And the UK has always said, no way in hell will we work with you on that. President Trump did quite the opposite today, despite the fact that there is a 28-page indictment from the special counsel Robert Mueller detailing all the evidence that President Putin says he wants to see. President Trump said, well, he was very strong and powerful on this, and he also said that he was quite willing to have officers of the FBI come and interrogate those 12 GRU Russian military intelligence officers to assist in that investigation. And I did find that sort of contrast between those who mistrust Russia's motives and President Trump, who may not quite have the same skepticism, would behave. Dermot.
OK, Diana, thank you very much indeed. Well, we want to get to the other side of that, then reaction in the United States. Let's go to our US correspondent, Cordelia Lynch. And Cordelia, I noticed while the news conference was going on, you picked up on Twitter this line that I've repeated, that early on in the news conference, Donald Trump said that President Putin has an interesting idea about who's behind the interference in the American election, which seems to accept that there was some, which of course he then denied. I mean, it would have been nice if that had been explored a bit more.
Yes, he seemed later to allude in some way that might be other actors, perhaps even Americans, involved in the own meddling of their own election. Dermot, this is being viewed as a jaw-dropping press conference. It's been met by the US networks here with frankly indignation and some condemnation. We've just heard one of the major networks report immediately after it, calling it one of the most disgraceful performances ever by a US president. Now, it's important to concede that there is a very feverish, some would argue very partisan climate in the way that the Russia investigation is being reported. But irrespective of what prism you look at this through, it is quite something to see an American president just days off the back of his own Department of Justice indicting 12 Russians for alleged meddling in the US election, to then question that conclusion, not to take the opportunity to condemn or confirm that he believes that the Russians did meddle, and instead say that he felt that President Putin was very convincing, very forceful in his argument, and claim that in no way was Moscow involved in this. And I think that's why it's going to prove a real problem on Capitol Hill for those Republicans who want to see the Robert Mueller probe see its course, for them to be able to look into whether there was indeed collusion, to see what role Russia had. And now you have a president standing alongside Vladimir Putin, America's former foe, saying that he is willing to accept Putin's version of events. That's going to be very difficult. They talked about Syria, they talked about Iran, about nuclear disarmament, but it is this probe and the president's unwillingness to conclude that Russia did meddle that I think will be met with so much hostility, and that's starting to emerge just in the past few minutes. I think it will be poured over for days to come. Look, there are plenty of Republicans I speak to, plenty of those that were involved in the Trump campaign who, like the president, say there was no collusion. But even if that's the case, people want to see justice done here, for the right people to be interviewed and for Robert Mueller to have the time to look at the documents and the individuals. And we have seen in the past few days that there are clearly cases to be heard. There is a deep mistrust of Russia, and whilst many will support warmer relations and support Donald Trump's willingness to take to the global stage to do deals, they need to see him also support the judicial process.
Cordelia, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure you and I will be discussing this well into this evening. I'm joined now by our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, and pick up on some of those themes. The reaction to what Donald Trump seems to have accepted here at face value from President Putin. People are going to say he's been suckered in here. President Putin said nothing to do with collusion, no meddling in the US election, no problem with Crimea. Those spies you allege that meddled in that, well, you know, they did nothing wrong. And Donald Trump seems to have swallowed it hook, line and sinker.